nation. And if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Sydney welcomes 2026 with a spectacular fireworks display, though celebrations are tempered by sadness after the recent Bondi Beach attack. Kiribati becomes the first place to enter the new year, with celebrations on a remote atoll marked in darkness and isolation. Authorities say people attack and damage a provincial governor's office in southern Iran after days of economic protests. The incident occurs in Fasa as officials report doors and glass destroyed while unrest continues. China's President Xi Jinping says reunification with Taiwan is unstoppable in his New Year message from Beijing. He speaks after China ends live-fire military drills around the island, according to state media. Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist, is set to become New York mayor, plans a midnight oath at a historic subway site, followed by a public ceremony. He raises $2.6 million for the transition and events, with Bernie Sanders expected to take part in the inauguration. The US Justice Department says it still has 5.2 million pages of Epstein-related files to review and needs hundreds of lawyers to complete the work. Officials warn the process will push the final release far beyond the original congressional deadline. Thailand releases 18 Cambodian soldiers under a new ceasefire after weeks of deadly border clashes. Both sides say the truce eases tensions after fighting that killed over 100 people and displaced hundreds of thousands. Iran's prosecutor general says economic protests are legitimate, but warns any move to create insecurity or damage public property will face a decisive response. He says authorities will act against what they view as externally driven efforts to destabilize the country. China says it will impose an additional 55% tariff on certain beef imports from countries including Brazil, Australia and the United States that exceed set quotas from January the 1st. Beijing says the investigations found imports were damaging its domestic industry, with levies covering fresh, frozen, bone-in and boneless beef. We start off in the Middle East this hour, and several people attacked and damaged the provincial governor's office in Fasa in southern Iran. Hamed Ostavar, who is the head of Fasa city's judiciary, told Mizan that part of the office door and glass were destroyed without providing details on how the attack occurred. Fasa is located 780 kilometers south of Tehran, where protests over the high cost of living began Sunday among shopkeepers. The movement has since spread to some universities, reflecting growing public anger over economic conditions. Joining us now is Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and former US Secretary of Commerce. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Raymond, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Of course, this is part of broader protests throughout Iran, the Iranian people dissatisfied economically with inflation, rising prices of groceries, cost of living, rental prices, and so forth. This is the first amount of violence that we've seen during these protests, which are about 3 days in now. Could you talk a little bit to us about why the people in Iran are so unhappy? Of course, the state of the economy is facing heavy sanctions. What more can you tell us?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Thomas, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. You know that peace has to be waged like war, and there has to be some strategy along with partners and principles in order to do that. The unrest in Iran shows that there is an opportunity to work on basic principles having to do with economic engagement, the welfare of the people of Iran, in order to bring a wider peace to that area. There is no question that there has been mismanagement by the government of Iran now. Along with sanctions, those have had an effect. But it cannot be that this situation will stabilize and will come out favorably to building a lasting peace in the Middle East if the only approach is to send in the bombers and resort to violence. Here in the United States, as you know, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu met only yesterday, and the outcome of that was not promising, in that there was no indication of a broader strategy except to continue what has been done. There have been protests in the past, as you know, on economic matters, but it goes beyond economic matters in Iran. It has to do with the suppression of women. It has to do with basic human rights. Unfortunately, in the United States approach to Iran now, the might is right approach is the one that's being taken. This is not a formula or a strategy for an outcome which is beneficial to long-term peace. Nevertheless, one hopes that the powers that be who have interest in this area will get together in order to bring a peaceful resolution to this problem rather than further suppression.
Indeed, and Raymond, of course, this comes as, the capital Tehran, of course, has a huge water problem, and there was talks of even evacuating the entire city. If these protests get more violent and get more widespread, can this do you think this could cause some real issues for the Iranian government? Of course, we have to actually acknowledge as well Pezeshkian's statement saying that he is going to listen to some protesters' demands. But realistically, what can the Iranian government do here?
Well, it has two choices ahead of it. One is to try to move forward in a way which is beneficial to the people, or resort to further suppression. Unfortunately, the track record of this government has been to resort to further suppression. If there were a comprehensive international approach, it would be an opportune time to work on the economic side of a strategic approach in order to be able to bring some transition toward a regime which is not authoritarian, is not driven by ayatollahs, and an ideology which sets it apart from the rest of the world, which is trying to move toward human rights and democracy. Unfortunately, at this point, there are no signs from the international community, particularly in the United States, of an approach which has promises. Even if this government is overthrown, the question is, if it's overthrown, what comes next? Is it a more authoritarian approach, or is it one which puts the country on the path to democracy and human rights?
Indeed. Raymond, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. Of course, we'll continue to cover that ongoing situation in Iran as it develops. But now over to Israel, and the United Nations rights chief Volker Turk has strongly criticized Israel's plan to suspend dozens of aid organizations from operating in Gaza starting this week. Turkey has called the move outrageous while urging the international community to press Israel to change its course. The latest ban by Israel affects 37 NGOs, including Doctors Without Borders, Norwegian Refugee Council, and World Vision International. Meanwhile, Israel has said that these restrictions are due to new guidelines on the employment of Palestinian staff. Humanitarian organizations warn that these restrictions will seriously impact aid distribution in Gaza and the West Bank, where supplies are already remain inadequate for the population. Joining us now, once again, is Raymond Vickery. Of course, this situation continues to unfold. Israel says this is about employment guidelines for Palestinian staff, suspending 37 major aid organizations. What does this mean for civilians on the ground in Gaza and, of course, people in the West Bank as well?
Well, thanks for letting me comment on this. This is just a further indication that there really is not a peace for Israel and Gaza. What there is a continuation with a ceasefire of sorts at this time, rather than a comprehensive peace. The peace has to be waged. The 20-point plan, which was put forward by President Trump and agreed to by Netanyahu and Gaza and Hamas, had as a prominent part of it the restoration of aid, the rebuilding, the relief for citizens, and that is not occurring. What is happening is that there is a doubling down, really, of Israel in terms of taking control and having ethnic cleansing, if you will, of Gaza. And so this is a part of that way forward, as opposed to the kind of plan which really was very hopefully pulling in nations from across the world to be able to support a true peace and a restoration of human rights in regard to Gaza, as well as protection for Israel. So this is not a hopeful sign. And the worst part of it is that the United States, which is the chief arms merchant and supporter of Israel, really is turning basically so far a blind eye to the suffering which is going on and has been alleviated through organizations like Doctors Without Borders, but under this latest move will be further deepened in misery because of the lack of the fulfillment of the key part of the 20-point plan,
Yes.
Which is relief for the citizens of Gaza and a rebuilding there, as well as a cessation of hostilities.
What's your reading, Raymond, on Israel's animosity towards the United Nations? Of course, it long accuses UNRWA of being involved in Hamas operations, among other things. Does Israel risk being isolated on the international stage if it continues rhetoric like this? And what's your reading of its attitude towards, as I said, the United Nations and all these other humanitarian agencies and the accusations that they make against them?
Well, I think that there is no question that Israel is not embarked upon a program and strategy which will bring it long-term peace. Unfortunately, what it seems to have learned from the disastrous experience of World War II is that might makes right, and that you can pursue a nationalistic approach to the problems of the Middle East without a consideration of how you're going to have a long-term peace plan.
Yeah.
The only hope is, and we've seen it moving forward, is that governments are going to put their money where their mouth is and not continue to support this disastrous Israeli approach to Gaza.
Raymond, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on to our next story. And according to sources, Saudi Arabia has welcomed the United Arab Emirates' announced withdrawal of troops from Yemen. But tensions are expected to remain as long as Abu Dhabi continues to back separatist forces in the south. Riyadh is adopting a wait-and-see approach, noting that the crucial issue is whether the UAE will halt support to the separatists. The UAE withdrawal is seen as a positive step towards de-escalation, but Saudi Arabia will monitor the situation very carefully. The UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council has advanced rapidly, seizing large parts of Hadramaut and Mara, causing further instability in the region. We're now joined by Major General Sudhakar Ji, a senior strategic and international affairs expert. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. How significant of a development is this today, Sudhakar Ji? Of course, we thought there was going to be a possible proxy war inside Yemen between the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Is this a significant development when it comes to de-escalating of fighting, or is it going to continue?
No, it's good evening, Thomas. Thank you for getting me for your show. It's more than a significant development. I would say it's a huge turnaround if it is genuinely happening. You see, we need to understand. Our viewers will do well to understand what is the larger problem. The larger problem is Yemen is divided into two parts. One is the North Yemen. The second is the South or the Southern Yemen. Southern Yemen is larger in size. The dispute majorly is taking place in southern Yemen. What is the problem? The problem is, you see, the primary region of southern Yemen is under contention with the Southern Transitional Council. Southern Transitional Council is a UAE-backed group seeking independence from Yemen. It wants to form a separate country. And because of this, there is often in tension with Saudi Arabia's interests. So there are two primary stakeholders in the country of Yemen. And in Yemen, in southern Yemen, is the major conflict which is taking place. And there the Saudi Arabia faction, the proxies, as also the UAE proxies are operating against each other, much against a kind of a truce and agreement which both the countries have had a couple of years back. I think it is UN brokered peace which they had established in 2022, if I am not wrong. But the conflict has been raging for quite some time. And therefore, what it brings to me is that the main port, the main area of interest is Aden. Aden is in southern Yemen, and that is the place which is actually dominated by the Southern Transitional Council force, which is backed by UAE. This has to be understood, and this is where Saudi Arabia had carried out recently, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, some strikes on shipments to STC. In short, Southern Transitional Council is called as STC, highlighting the conflict despite the broader Saudi UAE coordination against Houthis, which I have already said it was a UN brokered truce in 2022. But another issue I wish to highlight in response to your question is that the STC, that is the UAE-backed faction or the proxy, it controls the larger portion of the southern Yemen, the significant southern areas particularly, often clashing with the internationally recognized government and allied with Saudi Arabia. So there is a government in South Yemen or southern Yemen which is internationally recognized. It is supported by Saudi Arabia because the STC willy-nilly, despite the truce, has been violating and trying to influence. Also, let me share that UAE, based on a kind of a prior commitment, couple of years back, I think 4 years back, they had pulled back their troops. But despite that, they have been supporting, providing arms, weapons, like the shipment which was carrying, it has been bombarded or hit by Saudi Arabia. So that is the real crisis. What is the aim of this whole conflict? The Saudi Arabia, it is aiming to maintain influence and counter Houthis in the north. Houthis are operating in northern Yemen, but also seeks to limit the STC expansion. STC is backed by UAE. This has to be understood, and because of this, it is leading to recent strikes on UAE, which I have already brought out. And therefore, the situation, although it may appear to be a very significant turnaround, I only hope and pray that it sustains and continues to remain the way it is demonstrated after the warning has been given and UAE has pulled back, and it continues to maintain peace and normalcy in southern Yemen. Otherwise, things may go out of hand.
Yes, Major General Sadaka Ji, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on to our next story, and Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged solid steps to promote high-quality development and deepen reforms across the country in his New Year message. Xi has extended his best wishes to the people for the coming year. He highlighted China's achievements over the 14th five-year plan and thanked citizens for their exceptional diligence and invaluable contributions. Xi has noted that 2026 marks the beginning of the 15th five-year plan and called for clearer goals, boosted confidence and strong momentum to press ahead. He emphasized promoting prosperity for all, further opening up and writing a new chapter in China's development, concluding with best wishes for the nation and the people. Let's take a listen into what he said.
汉同胞血浓于水，祖国统一的历史大势不可阻挡。
Now, Australia's Sydney began 2026 with a fireworks display held under an enhanced police presence weeks after gunmen killed people at the Jewish event in the city. Sydney's annual New Year's celebrations are known globally for their spectacular fireworks, with 40,000 pyrotechnic effects stretching 7 miles across buildings and barges along its harbour, including the city's iconic harbour bridge and opera house. Organisers held a minute's silence for the victims of the attack with the harbour bridge lit up in white and a menorah symbol used to symbolise Judaism projected onto its pylons. Traditional Christmas celebrations at Bondi were muted this year, and several New Year events planned there were cancelled. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.